the pride of Hampton County. I know we gotta hurry because you got to get to some press conferences today over at the facility. But glad to have you, brother. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. It's good to be back with you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I know we missed you last week, but that wasn't because we wanted to miss you. It was just scheduling conflict. How's your bracket?
Not good. I thought I was doing well on day one, and then it all just went to heck after I think it was day two, and I think I'm like I don't even know what percentage I am, but I quit paying attention to it because it was so bad.
99.5% right here.
Jeez, I'm not going to know what to do with myself this afternoon with no basketball on. I mean, after 4 straight days of this or 3 straight days, whatever, I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
You'll figure it out. Now,
Yeah, probably. We're busy enough.
You'll probably be writing something on what Mike Shula and Clayton White have to say.
Yeah,
right? They come up.
I imagine so.
Yeah. There you go. 12:30. The coordinators will meet. We'll shifting gears from baseball and March Madness and all that stuff in the first hour to football. Now, Alex, is spring practice. I think tomorrow is the third practice, or is it tomorrow? No. Yeah. Tomorrow's the third, right?
Yep.
And then Thursday will be the fourth. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. We're on schedule here. Okay. What are you learning? What stood out?
So the first day we were there, didn't see too much, just all stretching and things at ball security, special teams stuff. Obviously the story of the day from day one of practice was the Vakari Swain news. I think obviously that was the top news coming out of the day, and we'll see kind of continue to monitor that and see, how one just with Vakari Swain, but two, that other corner spot, because I think if you're making a spring depth chart, I think you'd probably feel pretty good about penciling in Vakari Swain at that other corner spot, obviously the Judge Collier. So continue to monitor that. And I thought another one of the things that stood out from day one of practice that we saw was Luke Doty was dressed as a quarterback and going through, or he stretched as a quarterback, but then did, he's listed as an athlete, so he did all the special teams drills. So I thought that was interesting, and we talked about that on the show last week. I think it's just kind of an experience thing to add to that room, because it's a really good room overall, but it's a young room when you look at just the backups, and really Norris, you can still count him as young too. So that was a few of the things from those types of practices you can see from guys who look pretty good physically. I thought one guy that stood out to me was Fred Johnson. From a year one to year two, I thought he looked really good physically, and we saw what he could do on the field last year. So I think they're expecting him to make a big jump and need him to make a big jump there. And then Rasul Faison was another one that I thought looked like, it looks like an SEC running back. We've seen what he can do on the field, but physically he looked really good as well.
Yeah, I spoke with someone the other day that has had a chance to spend some time around him, obviously, and I said, "Well, what stands out about him?" He said, "Everything. The guy looks like a man. He talks like a man. He walks like a man. And now he is a man. He's also, I think, 25 years old. I mean, he's been around a little while, but from a physicality standpoint, Alex, when you put him into the mix here, and Juwan Howell and Matthew Fuller and Oscar Attaway, like if you're using an eyeball test to look at a running back, that is a good looking group of dudes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they would absolutely pass the eyeball test. When Matthew Fuller is a guy who I'm going to continue to keep an eye on, because I'm interested to see how he can perform, because last year he was physically looked like he was ready to go. I mean, he came in ready physically, but I think he just obviously he had so many guys ahead of him on the depth chart that he kind of could use that redshirt year to continue to learn to be an SEC back, to pick up everything from the offense, the blitz pickups, and everything like that. But maybe he's ready to take that big year one, year two jump. And Jawarn Howell, I thought when he got in last year, you could see his athleticism and his quickness and explosion, and you saw it in that Illinois game too, when his workload increased. And so it's a really it's a deep room when you look at it. Obviously, maybe you like to have 5 scholarship backs in there, but I think you like the 4 that you have in there, and it's a really interesting room that it's got a lot of potential.
I'm curious as to what you have on the agenda to talk to Coach Shula about today. We were having some conversation with JC last week about maybe some potential shifts in offensive philosophy from the standpoint of RPOs and things like that, just trying to simplify some things. And obviously he's got an extensive background with a variety of quarterbacks. He's coached college football, he's coached the NFL. He's seen a lot of different things and what certain personnel is capable of doing versus others, et cetera, et cetera. It is an offensive line that I think we probably should expect to at least see one transfer starting on at least to begin the year when they get there against Virginia Tech. I would imagine it seems to be trending that way. But I am really curious, with this stable of running backs who are largely unproven at South Carolina, but not unproven in college. I'll be curious as to what offensively they think the best thing is for them to go along with their quarterback, Lenore Sellers. I mean, he could have been sacked 150 times last year. It felt like, he's going to get sacked. It's the SEC. I get that. But being able to minimize that, utilize the talent, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here. My point was, have you thought about any of that and what you plan to ask Mike Shula so we know what we're going to be reading later on?
Yeah, the run game is something that's really interesting. You brought up, how do they continue to utilize Lenore Sellers' legs? Because, I mean, obviously we all saw how they did it last year with some of those quarterback powers, to both sides of the line. And, it's really interesting to see, kind of how Mike Shula kind of puts his stamp on the offense. What do they kind of bring over from the Dow Loggins offense, being that Mike Shula had, a big hand in that too, helping put the game plans together in his role last year, helping Dow Loggins. But the run game is something I'm really interested to, hear what he says about today, because we mentioned the stable of backs that they have that are really talented, and Lenoris's legs, obviously we saw what he can do last year. And, there's a few other things, we wanted to hear from Mike Shula, just, obviously being that there are only 2 practices in, that there's not a whole lot, from on the field stuff that they're going to be able to add, just because from they haven't even put the pads on yet. But, just his take on the offensive line right now, you got those 3 key spots on the interior having to replace. And, I think you feel good, about some of the quality options that they can have in there with guys like a Trovon Ball or a Tree Bobley. Can they slide in there to those guard spots? And then the transfers that you mentioned. And then at wide what's he seen from Nick Harbor so far? Obviously Nick Harbor talked last week, and you kind of hear the confidence he has, and having not have to worry about battling with spring practice and track. He's going to do full on spring practice. How's he seen that kind of help him so far, even though it's early on? So a lot of different topics to add. Not only with Mike Shula, but with Clayton White as well. Just a lot of things they got to replace defensively, and how good he feels about what they have to replace. It
does seem like the light has come on with Nick, doesn't it?
Yeah. You could see it middle of last year towards going into that end of the season. You really start to see the light come on, and I think I asked him about that in his press conference, and you could just tell he kind of just mentioned just gaining confidence. And I think the more he did it, the more it became more comfortable to him, and he put a lot of work in, and credit to him and Mike Furry for putting that work in and continue to build him. But I think this spring is huge for him because as I mentioned, having his sole focus on football, he can build off of that a really strong into that season, and he's going to have a lot of eyes on him, not only from a local standpoint but from a national standpoint, being that he's one of the top incredible athletes in the game right now. So they need him to take a big step forward, and it seems like he's doing everything he can to do that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously going back to last season and watching him play, he continued to look more and more like a wide receiver and less like a guy who was trying to learn to play wide receiver. But then you hear it when he communicates with the media, everybody goes through this. The young guys who have the expectations, you can if you've been doing it long enough, you can tell by listening to them and watching them, okay, this is all still kind of, their mind is 1,000 different directions when they're asked a question or whatever the case is. It does not seem like that at all for him. He seems incredibly focused on the task at hand. I don't know that he would even answer this question. This is just a curiosity deal. It really actually means literally nothing. But Curtis Fry, of course, retired. Curtis Fry had a lot to do with his recruitment to South Carolina. You almost wonder if when he lost that relationship with Coach Fry, if maybe that affected his thinking as to whether he wanted to continue to run track here. But obviously he loves Shane Beamer in the football program. That wasn't something he was going to do or anything like that. Just curious, I mean, that happened a while ago. He went through a season and, maybe it's like, yeah, I'm kind of done with it. I don't know. I don't know if that affects anything or not, but it certainly is interesting. Back to last week, Zion Giles commits to the Gamecocks. Give us your perspective on what that means to this class.
Yeah, we've seen, it's another really good get for Lonnie Teasley and those guys. They continue to build that room, and, I think they looked at, when you look at these past few cycles, they've really focused on building that room, not only from a production standpoint on the field and from a starter standpoint, but building the depth in that room. And I think it just really has come down to, one, they've had a lot of really talented in-state offensive linemen that they've done a good job in landing these past few cycles. But one, I think they just kind of were not going to let 2023 happen again, because as we all saw with the injuries that happened on that line, it not only derailed the offensive line's performance just with all the different guys going in there, but that hurt the offensive performance overall. And I think now they've built a really solid room, and with Giles, he's a really good player. A guy coming out of Carver's Bay, and a guy who I think is a top 150 player in the composite rankings right now, and just another really good get for South Carolina. And they had to battle off Clemson late in that one, but they did it, and now South Carolina obviously landed his commitment as another really good one for Lonnie Teasley and those guys.
You had a really interesting column up 3 days ago, so we can go a little bit deeper in it now that everybody's had a chance to read it. If they haven't, go check it out. And it's something that I had kind of hit on last week, or we collectively here, we had kind of hit on with how well they have actually recruited at this position. Now, clearly, some of the guys aren't here yet, or some are really young, but others have been around a little while, and it's their turn. Like, hey, you need to go play. You've been here for 2-3 years. It's time to turn the page and let's go do some things. But it was titled, "A Look at the Last 10 High School Offensive Line Commitments." Give us a summary of that, and what you when you actually stopped and went back and looked at these guys that Lonnie Teasley and this staff collectively have signed at this position. What did you discover?
You really can see a lot of potential in each of those guys, and a lot of those guys are still in the program. And obviously there's a few of these past cycles where the numbers wise they need to add a lot of guys, but you look at guys like Cam Pringle, who you can see the potential there, and he's still working his way up the depth chart. But guys like Cam Pringle, guys like Blake Franks, who seems like has taken another, from a physical standpoint, both of those guys from year 1 to year 2 have taken a step. A guy that I'm interested to see is Marquis Anderson. He's a guy who was finally healthy last year and played a lot of special teams work, but now can he work his way into one of those guard positions? And I think it's a big year for Marquis Anderson. So it goes back to when I put that together and you looked at all the 10 of those linemen, not even including the transfers that they've added for this past cycle, not only the past cycle and what they did, but this year it's just you could argue that's the spot they've recruited the best at. And now I think it's just taking that next step, being more consistent, I think, on the line. They started to perform better as, from that middle part to end of the season. But now it's that next step of putting it all together from the start. And, they've got, with the way they've recruited those high school ranks that I kind of threw in that article, like there's a lot of potential in that room and a lot of different options they can go with.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but 6 of those 10 are from the Palmetto State, correct?
Yeah, the Palmetto State's really had a bunch of good offensive linemen in this, and not only this cycle, but these past few cycles. Guys I mentioned, Josiah Thompson, you throw him in there. Guy was a 5-star offensive tackle out of Dillon this past cycle, and he's going to start at left tackle. Started left tackle last year, and obviously got that spot locked down heading into year 2. And it's the state has had that's one thing that's helped the offensive line too. Is the state's been really good, and they've got not only Giles in this class, but you got Anthony Baxter already committed out of South Point. You got guys like Trey Aiken and Desmond Green, who are highly ranked or high profile guys who have a lot of different offers, and South Carolina's going after them as well. And so it's a credit to Luke Day to Lonnie Teasley and those guys for continuing to build that room. And it's deep room right now. Now it's just taking that next step.
Yeah, the relationships that have been built. Lonnie Teasley, it really is an interesting conversation, and it depends on who you have it with too, because everybody's got a little bit of a different opinion or flavor of an opinion, if you will, on the job that he has done since being named the offensive line coach. He obviously was in the program prior to as basically an assistant offensive line coach, but you've got like 50 years of experience or something in coaching the offensive line on this staff right now. Greg Adkins and Teasley and Sean Elliott, and I know that Sean is technically the tight ends coach, and Greg is quote unquote off the field or whatever. That's fine, but when it comes to recruiting, my understanding here, and I'm not trying to take it, I know that there's a group effort when they recruit a lot of kids. Shane Beamer is big on, whatever it takes, we need to do what we need to do. But my understanding is all these guys, the main relationship has been with Lonnie Teasley. And so when they've had their struggles on the field, clearly, you're like, golly, we got to get some things right here. But then off the field, he goes out and signs. Like, I don't remember a time in Gamecock football history that they've signed this many quality offensive linemen. I don't. I've been around a long time, as long as you could actually follow it. I don't remember any run like this. But I think the reason that maybe it's not getting more public play, Alex, is because the success has been quite hit or miss on the field.
Yeah, and that's something that's going to be interesting. You go back to what we're talking about with Mike Shula. How does he help that offensive line continue to be more consistent? Is that maybe from a more different run concept type of things? Is that something that helps that line up? But they were an older group last year, you guys with those interior guys. But now you're going to have a Josiah Thompson who's in second year and has all the talent in the world. Obviously those. We'll see what they do with those interior spots in case Henry's back for another year, and a guy who's been a starter, for 2 years now. And I think it's just one, we going back to keep talking about just being more consistent on the offensive line. But I mean, you can't doubt what they've done on the recruiting trail with those guys. I mean, Lonnie Teasley, Greg Atkins, Sam Survey, like they've done an incredible job, and it's now just taking it and running with it because they've got a lot of talented options they can go with at each spot.
Alex Jones, the pride of Hampton County. It's 11:20 here on Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show, powered by our friends at Electric Bikes of Charleston, electricbikescharleston.com, if you'd like to ride as fast as Nick Harbor runs. On the other side, you got a guy named Dylan Stewart. What does he look like from a physical standpoint? Because last year, obviously, he is a large man. We all know that. But we remember when Jadeveon came in and you thought he couldn't get any bigger, and then you turn on the TV his sophomore year and you're like, oh my God, he got huge. What does he look like? And because we haven't, Alex, we have not anticipated the return of a defensive lineman at South Carolina any more than Dylan Stewart since Clowney. Since Clowney, from his sophomore year to his junior year, it was like, oh my gosh, this kid's coming back. It is a very similar feel right now, but also they're having to replace largely the rest of the defensive line, although they have guys who played. What does he look like? How is he handling it?
Yeah, I thought when I saw him at practice last week, I thought he looks bigger and stronger. Like he continues to be in the weight room, and you saw that from preseason camp into the season last year. You can see what he did from a physical standpoint, and it looks like he's taken another little jump from a physicality standpoint. And I think now the next step with him is he's going to have all the attention, as you mentioned, not only really just on the field from an opposing offensive lineman are going to be game planning for him. Last year when you think about it, they had to game plan for him too, but they also had to deal with Kyle Kennard on the other side. So there was a lot of attention to Kyle Kennard as well. But now when you look at, a lot of the attention is going to go to Dylan Stewart next year. And, I think that's going to be one thing that's going to help those interior guys for one thing, they continue to produce because, I mean, you've got to think they're going to try to double team Dylan Stewart a little bit, and that's going to help open up the interior. But now it's that opposite edge spot. Who's going to step up there? You got guys like Jalen Brown and Brian Thomas, who when you watch him play, that guy goes all out and he produces. Like he had a kind of a sneaky good year last year, and he's entering as a senior, and so I think it could be a big year for him. So there's a whole bunch of different options that go out on the opposite side of him. But from Dylan Stewart perspective, he's going to have all the attention in the world from the national media. You're already seeing that, him being named one of the best overall players in the country returning in 2025 by multiple outlets. So he's going to have a lot of attention, but, you have to imagine he's ready for it. And with the way he had a lot of attention last year and he handled it pretty well.
Yeah, those multiple outlets I'm drawing from another column that you wrote include Pro Football Focus having him as the second-ranked edge defender returning to college football behind Colin Simmons from Texas. That's pretty good company there. I guess I didn't realize that his pass rush grade last year was 91.4. He had 51 pressures on the season. That's about 4 a game that were tied second among returning Power 4 edge rushers. Again, this I'm drawing from Alex. I'm stealing all of his information here. Also, the College Football Network has him as the second overall returning player, like overall returning player in the country. Cole Kubelik has him as his third-ranked overall returning player. This is over everybody. I mean, every position, number 3. And he is, of course, on the All-American team already for ESPN because that matters in January, February, and March. But still, though, it goes back to what you were just saying a minute ago, and it brings everybody else into the equation here. He's going to be numero uno that is circled by Virginia Tech and every team that South Carolina plays after that until somebody kind of arrives at that level of disruption. Okay, yeah, we're circling him, but this kid. So what have you heard around the facility? You mentioned Brian Thomas at the other edge position. I've heard good things about the kid from Missouri, of course. What about the interior, though? What do those guys look like? And although it's perceived to be an inexperienced group here at South Carolina and maybe a little bit of a thinner group than you'd like, I know they if they can, they'll still sign another superstar in the portal if they can find one in April. But what have you heard about those guys?
Yeah, I think the transfers have caught the attention of the staff so far in Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy from Texas A&M and Devontae Miles from Bowling Green. You got those two guys coming in with some of the returners and, Nick Barrett and Monkel Goodwine, Monkel Goodwine, I think, when you look at him, could be in for a big season. I think you pencil him in as a starter, but I remember talking to Travian Robertson, before the year, and he mentioned, how excited he was for him. And, he was behind some of those other guys that we've talked about on the interior, but I mean, he could be in for a big year. And I thought he got in last year, he flashed. But and another guy I'm interested to see is Xavier Hardy. He's one who's coming in from East Mississippi, number 1 overall JUCO player in the country, and I think he could be in. For maybe starting, maybe not. We'll see. It's way too early to really see any that matters. But he's going to need to produce for South Carolina. I think he can do that. So I'm interested to see what Clayton White today talks about those guys on the interior because it's a huge one. The defense on all 3 levels has big spots to fill, but they've got 3 top high-end defensive tackles they're having to replace, and they got a few options to do that. And then we'll see once that spring portal window opens up what they're able to do.
Brownlow-Dindy and Xavier Hardy are 2 guys you want to get off the bus as soon as they can.
Yeah.
The first of all, how there's always the perception that if you sign a player out of the portal and he didn't come from like a big name school, not always with everybody, I'm just saying with just, a few people, oh, this guy came from Bowling Green, he's probably not very good. Okay. Well, to those people, Brownlow-Dindy came from A&M, the 5-star kid. Xavier Hardy was wanted by everybody in the SEC. You mentioned Monkel Goodwine. He comes from Alabama. All right, so Jaylen Brown came from Missouri, a very highly touted defensive end from there. All right, so these are all SEC guys that are here on this roster at South Carolina, and they look like machines. I mean, all of them, every one of them. I mean, Hardy is enormous. I know he's dropped a little bit away, but my understanding is that was good for him to do that. They're going to get it back up. Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy is huge, Alex. He's enormous. I'm talking about his body, the way that he's built. He might not be 6'7". I don't give a crap about that. This guy is a machine when you look at him. I mean, again, the eyeball test, these are the guys, wherever you go, let them get off the bus first.
Yeah, I think you're really starting to see on the interior what they're looking for at that spot. And, I'll add another guy, Caleb Williams. Obviously, he's banged up to start spring practice, and he was one I was interested to see and if he can make an impact. But he was one where I remember seeing in the high school recruiting process, and I was kind of like, whoa, like he looks like he could be ready to come in right now and play. And, we'll see how much he's able to do towards the end of spring practice. But another guy, too, that's not in for spring practice at that spot is Christian Ingram, who kind of fits that same mold of what they're looking for with Travian Robinson and those guys. And, you're right. It's a group that's physically just a big group. And, it's kind of interesting just because when you look at last year's roster, TJ Sanders and, it was maybe a little bit, shorter from a defensive tackle standpoint, but I mean, that obviously didn't stop him. He's got a chance to be a second or maybe even a high 3rd round draft pick. But, I think you really start to see the mold of what they're looking for at defensive tackles because that room really kind of has a consistent, size and, weight there. And I think it's an impressive physically looking room now. It's just taking to the next step with the on-field production.
There's no question. That group and the offensive line have so much to prove. This is going to be quite a battle. I can't wait to watch it. Do me a favor. Ask Mike Shula who number 81 is. Reno Rame. How about that name? A walk-on tight end who is 6'7", 260 pounds out of Cincinnati, Ohio. He enrolled in the fall, and he joined the team on the first day of spring practice last week. He is a walk-on. He earned a spot on the roster after tryouts. Well, there's a lot of stuff that's about to change with the rosters and all the NIL and et cetera, right? Reno, R-O-E-H-M, Reno Rame. So when you talk to Mike today, ask him, who the hell is 81? That would literally be how I asked the question. Who in the hell is 81, Mike?
Yeah, well, we'll see what kind of response I get if I ask him that way. But looking at, 6'7", 255. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Huge.
Yeah, I remember seeing him out there, and I don't think he was on the roster that we had when we were out there. And it's kind of like, who's this kid? No. And 6'7", he stood out, and as tight end's another spot that's intriguing with Michael Smith battling injury as well. And we'll see what he can do. They got options there, but being that he's a walk-on, maybe we'll see kind of from a future standpoint what he can bring. But it's definitely intriguing being that you're 6'7", 255 pounds as a redshirt freshman walk-on.
That's right, Reno Rame. Who would have thought we'd have two Renos on this team? Dante Reno and Reno Rame. Just saying.
Yeah,
we might be on to something. Somebody, all these folks that are watching and listening, remember March 24th, 2025, 11:30 a.m. The first time you heard of Reno Rame right here via the pride of Hampton County and myself. All right, what we miss? Did we miss anything? Anything? What do you got on the agenda? I know you got to get the dirt today out of the coordinators, and then we'll see some stuff. But what did we miss?
I think that's about it. We'll have a whole bunch of players tomorrow. I think a whole bunch on both sides of the ball, and it's going to be interesting to see what those guys have to say as spring practice get underway. And then then you got all the other sports going on. You got the men's basketball portal officially opening today, and I've seen when you look at Twitter, it seems like somebody's entering every minute around the country, and it's going to be crazy. And we know what South Carolina's going to have to do in the portal, so it's in a crazy time right now.
Yeah, I didn't really put anything down to ask you about that because it's just too early. I mean, there's just it's kind of chaos, but we obviously know that the Gamecocks have have some guys in the portal, and they might have another one in the portal, and they are efforting to sign some high quality players to replace those young men. So we'll see what happens there, but we'll let the dust settle on that a little bit before we start picking and prodding on that. Alex, we know you got to get you a sandwich or something before you get over and start buttering the OC and the DC with a bunch of questions. But don't forget, hey, Mike, who the hell's number 81?
I just put it in my notes. We're going to see.
You can tell them where, hey, look, this is coming from the show. They want to know who the hell is number 81.
Yeah, I'll make sure to do that.
Who's Reno Rame, and where did the name come from? You remember the movie Four Christmases? Have you seen that?
I haven't. I've heard of it, but I haven't.
You haven't seen that with Reese Witherspoon, which, by the way, she's taken. So back off. And Vince Vaughn.
No, I haven't seen it. No.
They started calling him Orlando when they were visiting his dad's house for Christmas, and his brothers were referencing him as Orlando, and she was caught off guard. She's like, I'm engaged to this guy, and that's not it. Why are they calling you Orlando? And one of his brothers goes, you didn't know that? He didn't tell you? We're all named after the cities we were conceived in. I'm Denver. He's Dallas. That's Orlando. So maybe Reno's got a similar story. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just kidding. To the Rame family, we're just having fun. Alex, what's today? Monday? Have a marvelous Monday afternoon, my man. Thanks for all that you do, and we'll chat with you next week.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
You got it, buddy. Thank you.